So for our viewers who have been watching for a little bit, we've talked about this budget bill, I think twice already at least. So I'm not going to go super in depth into the specifics, but I just want to say that right now it has passed the first stage in the Senate, which basically means that the senators have agreed to accept the House version of the bill, and now they are working on revisions. So in other words, the House version of the bill has passed the Senate parliamentarian, and now they are working on the amendments that they will then vote on and then send back to the House if it passes reconciliation. But the Senate has key rules, and I'm very sorry for those of you who are aware of these rules, but this is very important when you're talking about reconciliation. So the Senate parliamentarian is basically an advisory to the rules of the Senate. Okay? It's just a referee for the Senate rules. That's all it is. It's a nonpartisan position within the government, and all it does is advise. That's all it does. And whenever you go through reconciliation, there's this rule known as the Byrd Rule. It's way back in like 1989 or something. Basically, it says, listen, if you're going to go through reconciliation to avoid the 60 vote hurdle to get over the filibuster, then what you have to do is it's got like six rules that you have to follow. The three big ones that are always there is, policy changes cannot be in the bill. It can only deal with funding. And we'll talk about that later, but that's one of them. The bill cannot increase the deficit after a 10-year period. And we'll get into this later as well, but there's some ways around that as we will see. And then, of course, no changes to Social Security whatsoever. So funding for Social Security remains unchanged. At the end of the day, though, the parliamentarian is not who decides, what violates the Byrd Rule and what does not. Ultimately, it's the vice president, which is in this case J.D. Vance. So, um, we'll go over that all later, but that's just big stuff. But to finally pass, we're going to need 50 votes in the Senate, which means the Republicans can only lose 4 votes. Right now, they're already at 2. And Darren, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you. Um, what concerns you about this bill specifically, like the contents of this bill? And then what do you think about some of the stuff that has been kicked out by the parliamentarian?
Uh, well, I my biggest concern, honestly, is the tax cut extensions. That seems to be the biggest cost associated with the bill. I mean, we're at a time we've just accumulated so much debt. I mean, as much as in the short term it'll probably feel good for me. I don't know how much even it'll affect me. I mean, I haven't looked at the marginal rates, but I did see that for middle income households, which is what I would describe myself as, the savings are really only estimated to it'll net out like at like 1,000 a year, and that's on the upside. So yeah, that I mean, it just worries me that we're lowering taxes. Now is not the time for it. But written down, I think when you net it out, this is going to add around like 4 trillion to the debt, and now they've projected that out over 10 years. So I mean, it's not good. I guess if I had something to positive to say, I'm glad for the border and immigration enforcement funding. That seems to be like the one good part. There's some other like little things that are kind of nice, like they're gonna give like $1,000 to any baby born between like 2024 and 2028, so or something. So and that'll accrue like interest or whatever. So I mean, there's some nice little things that aren't going to cost way too much, but ultimately it seems just like a bad bill, because of the tax cuts. The Medicaid cut slash enforcement. I'm okay with the enforcement stuff on the Medicaid. I think that, I mean, there's nothing I can really criticize with that, but the cuts, however, I think that's generally bad. But
Yeah, I mean, overall, listen, not a good bill. Not a good bill. I mean, under the rosiest assumptions, the best case scenario is this is going to add 3.3 trillion over the next 10 years. The worst case scenario is this could, listen, don't take my word for it. Take, Republican Rand Paul's word for it.
This bill votes and this debt ceiling goes through, the debt is owned by the GOP, and there is no more campaigning and saying this is the Democrats. It will be owned by the Republicans, and I think that's a huge mistake.
I mean, this sucker is going to add over $5 trillion potentially over the next 10 years. And now don't worry. And here's the thing, it's all front loaded, right? So we're not even going to make it to the 10-year mark, right? They wouldn't be raising the debt ceiling if it wasn't if it wasn't going to add to the debt, right? And listen, I for the audience, I'm not against, deficit spending. I'm not against running up the money, but here's my thing is that you're going to have to give me something for it. And I mean something like tangible. For example, the Inflation Reduction Act, right? I'm a huge supporter of that. Things like, chip manufacturing subsidies, infrastructure, green energy, all of that. All of that shit sounds nice, right? Especially for sun or solar and wind, right? That's huge. I'm all for that. But this idea that we're basically going to cut taxes. I mean, like you said, those tax cuts, that's the chunk of the bill. I mean, that's just in the tax cut extensions alone, we're going to lose money on what we're saving between Medicaid, what they're cutting out of green energy, what they're cutting out of student loans, what they're cutting out of SNAP. But listen, if you're telling me, listen, Wyatt, you're going to get a tax cut out of this, and you need to be happy about that. I'm going to be like, listen, dude, we're we're going bankrupt. Number one, we're cutting from Medicaid, the most vulnerable people in society, and I understand what you're saying about the enforcement and the eligibility checks. But here's the thing, Darren. Every single time they do those, you want to know the funny thing? The enforcement policy cost more than what it costs to put the people on Medicaid. So it's a more expensive version of what you're trying to save. Isn't that interesting? But
that yeah, that I mean, you're probably right, honestly, because thinking about it, I mean, while I do imagine, like, I assume there is some fraud and abuse. I imagine it's pretty limited, and then you got to think you're going to be paying like however many salaries for these federal employees to go track people down and see if they're actually eligible or not. So ultimately, I don't see it saving a lot of money, and
right. I mean, in the private industry, they call this shrinkage. It's just the amount of waste or theft or whatever, abuse, somebody's cheating the system, right? I mean, it's cheaper and better for your business, just like it is for the government right now. It's better to just not even enforce it because it's going to cost 2 to 3 times what it is to just pay the people,
yeah, yeah,
Um,
and another thing. Now I'm getting my information pretty much solely from the New York Times, and I do
Lib.
trust them. But I'm wondering. Okay, so here's an item, and I'll get this. The caveat is that the Senate parliamentarian determined that this specific provision I'm about to list does not comply with the chamber's rules, and it may be removed or modified. But they have the removal of gender transition care from Medicaid, giving us a savings of 2.6 billion. I just don't see how that's possible. There's not enough transgender people on Medicaid trying to,
Right, right.
like, so these numbers are obviously, and the New York Times is probably just reporting what what they have access to, but there's no way you can get 2.6 billion in savings from like cutting out the trans people on Medicaid. Like I can't I don't even think it would be 0.1 billion if I'm being honest. I
Well,
don't see how.
and it also specifies, does it not, minors, right? Or does it just specify adults?
Oh, it's minors and adults, yeah.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. Well, still, there's no way. And well, and just to like clarify, because we're both going off of that New York Times articles, that's like the line item of the bill. So in other words, the Republicans are claiming that somewhere in the Biden administration or the previous budget reconciliation package that there was a gender transition care like line item, and they're just trying to remove that. But yeah, I agree. There's not a prayer that, and plus, gender affirming care that includes makeup. You know what I mean? Like that include like Ozempic, or like gender affirming care doesn't just go to transgenders, right? Like if you dye your hair or get extensions, that's gender affirming care. So I would it doesn't apply to just transgender stuff. So whenever, I guess what I'm saying is that whenever you expand the definition of gender affirming care, it's not really, most of the time it's not even referring to transgenders.
Yeah, I could definitely see a lot of it being like, do you remember those commercials that used to play about like gynecomastia?
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so I mean, you know, when a young boy develops tits because of some medication that had a bad side effect, obviously you need to, you know, chop those off. So, you know, that's also affirming care. But even if you included them in that number, like with like trans people, I just don't see how you could ever get that many billion. Uh, I don't see how you could get 2.6 billion out of that. That's just obviously a made up number on its face, and that's one of many because I was looking through the list and I just feel like these numbers would fall apart under even the most basic of scrutiny. Uh, yeah, I just don't see how we're saving this many billions, and so when you take that into account, where ultimately over 10 years, like the total savings is only like a trillion. But when you take the grain of salt that like half of it might just be BS, then you know I don't even know if we're getting half a trillion in savings. So you know if you net it out, it might. I mean it might be close. I'm sure it's like five trillion in total cost over the 10 years. Probably minimum, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, like there's some stuff that you can look at this bill and say like, oh, well, hey, at least we're getting this, you know, like most people they would point to the tax cut or that child tax, like that child bank account thing that you were talking about, or they'll talk about the fact that the military budget is going up or the border. But does that really? I mean, and just a sincere question to the audience: does that even come close to the fact that we might go $5 trillion in debt, right? Does that even is that even are we on the same planet if that's what it, and plus we're getting rid of all the really good stuff. I mean, Darren, I don't know what your opinions are on like the green energy and Medicaid and like SNAP, but like SNAP is getting cut almost in half. Like it's unbelievable. Um, and the national parks and the natural resources that are, you know, their protections are being, you know, withdrawn. I just don't look at how anyone can look at this bill and go, yeah, I mean, strictly outside of a partisan context, I don't know how anyone could support this. This is just bullshit, to be quite honest with you. Um,
It's pretty bad, especially I will say the green stuff. I mean that was a you know that's a growing industry, and honestly, I mean to get rid of, uh, I mean to do the
we should be
cuts they're doing.
fueling it. We should be fueling it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
No pun intended. Um, but yeah, that when I hear green energy, you should be thinking jobs, dude. You should be thinking jobs and growth. That's what you should be thinking.
Oh yeah, it's made a lot of jobs in this state. I mean, think of all the windmill technicians, and there are and they pay well too. I mean, that's not a bad job. Their salary is close to mine, so and I'm an accountant, so I mean
Yeah,
it's a great jobs program, and and I will say there was a specific provision in the bill that seems like it's not going to make it through, but it was talked about in the weeks prior. Not by us, but I had seen it talked about where they were thinking of selling off federal land. I saw something on here that that's unlikely to pass. So
I think it's already gotten
thank
pulled.
goodness.
I think it's already gotten pulled. So
Okay, thank goodness. Yeah, because I'm not seeing it again, so I'm thinking New York Times has updated the page and struck it from the yeah, because
I
it
got you.
was under the environment and green section. So
Yeah. Oh, it's actually if you scroll down, it's under natural resources towards the. It's still on mine. But anyway. Um, I do have another follow-up question for you. So obviously, we're both in somewhat agreement that this bill is bad in some way, right? We may disagree on what that means and what that looks like, but we both agree this is bad generally. Do you think
oh yeah.
that the Senate is gonna get the four defectors that it needs in order to stop this bill in the current form from passing? So right now they already have Rand Paul as a for sure and Tom Tillis as a for sure. They are not voting in support of this fucking thing. So they only need two more. So what do you think their chances are?
uh I think honestly their chances are pretty slim of getting the defectors. I think it'll probably pass. I think there's going to be some heavy amendments to it. I mean, it's going to get cut up for sure, but uh yeah, I think it'll pass. Uh, I I mean I could see maybe some I could see maybe some border and immigration enforcement getting on the chopping block. I could see some other things getting the chopping block, but uh, I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, I think the
I
biggest the
think
biggest stickler I think is going to be the Medicaid cuts, right? Don't you? Like I don't nobody's going to be a stickler in the Republican Party over the border security getting improved, right? Like that's if anything, I would say that the border security stuff is the most reliable thing to stay in that bill.
I'm of two minds. Uh, I think you know at first glance, you would think the border stuff would stay in, and it would play well, I'm sure, with the base for all these senators. But also, the big ag lobbies a lot of these senators, and a lot of their workforce comes from the illegal population. So there are competing interests. I could see it getting sliced up a bit. Uh, Yeah, the Medicaid stuff. I think a lot of the Medicaid cuts are probably going to have to be whittled down somewhere. And also the SNAP stuff, food stamps.
Right.
Uh, because uh, I'm also, I mean, on one hand, like a lot of these SNAP recipients are not starving, like to be honest, but it's not going to play well. If anybody cuts it. So, there's not a lot of incentive, I think, to make these uh, cuts that really don't amount to all that much. Uh, it's just going to play bad for the senators. So I could see some of these cuts getting whittled down. I don't think the senators want to go back to their state and advertise that they voted to cut it that much. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, well, so much so that Lisa Murkowski, right, the senator from Alaska, she's actually already got it. We don't know if the parliamentarian's going to let them do it or not, but there's like a special carve out in these Medicaid cuts for Alaska and Hawaii. So we'll see if that stays. But if it doesn't stay, then she's almost certainly a no. So they might have their three, but I don't know if getting a fourth, you may as well be asking for the world, dude. I mean, the idea that, and here's the thing though, I think the more interesting question, Darren, is when let's say it passes the Senate, right? And it goes over to the House. I mean, what's their majority in the House? It's only like 3 seats, right? 4 seats?
it's pretty low as well.
So do you think the Freedom Caucus could stop this?
I mean,
Or do you think they fall in line? I think that the Republicans the Freedom Caucus specifically, will cry bloody murder, and then they will ultimately fall right in line.
yeah, I mean, that's basically my that's kind of my estimation of them as well. I think there are a lot of big talk. I think maybe Thomas Massey will be more principled. He's really caught the ire of Trump lately, so maybe there's even a personal level in which he'll, be less compliant, so but beyond him, I mean, what other Republican can you name that won't go along with it?
Well, they need 8. They need 8 total to stop it in the House.
Yeah, I
Out of
think it'll.
220 though, you don't I still don't think so. I'll be honest. I think they fall in line like pretty quick, honestly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think they understand it. It would be bad for them as bad as it might be to advertise to their voters, their constituents that they voted for it. It would be worse to be on blast on Truth Social for the next 18 months, so or longer, so I think the calculation they'll make is that it would be better for them to just pass the bill. So I think the majority will fall. I think it'll pass the House if it once it goes back there for the second round.
Yeah, and honestly, like pragmatism is going to hit pretty like the Freedom Caucus understands that, if they amend this bill and they filibuster for as long as they can, um the odds of it going, through an amendment process again in the House and then back to the Senate and then, whew, that's that's not going to happen. And here's the thing, the Senate can only do budget reconciliation 3 times a year. They're already doing 2 of them here. One for the budget reconciliation and one to raise the debt ceiling. So if this fails here, then something's got to give whenever it comes back, which I think they'll see that and they'll be like, okay, we just kind of have to fall in line. And it's not just them, by the way. Like Democrats did this for Biden too. It's pretty. It's just kind of standard protocol that the Senate gets their way. I mean, we may all hate that, but that's just kind of the way it is.
I think it'll easily pass once the Senate sends it back. I don't think there'll be, and they've also set a deadline for themselves at what, July 4th.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
Trump's deadline. Yeah.
yeah, I think by July 4th or before then, it'll probably pass. I don't think it's really at much risk of not getting through before then. So, people scoffed at that idea, but I mean, I think it'll pass. I mean, but what do you think? Do you think it passes by July 4th or not?
July 4th would be a tall ask, just because they're just now starting the amendments process in the Senate, which so that means it would have to go through amendments process. We're recording obviously on a Monday, folks. So that would mean that it would have to go through all of the amendment stuff before Wednesday, and then it would have to go to the House for a vote on the floor by Friday to get on Trump's desk by Friday night. So it's a tall ask, but it is possible. So now let me be clear. This because there's some people on the left that are getting a little hopeful that this budget bill is going to die. I have news for you. They're going to pass a budget reconciliation bill. Whether or not there's some tweaks in this current form, that's really the question. The idea that this is going to die and Trump's not going to pass a budget bill, that's not going to happen. All right. It's just whether or not they pass it now or they pass it in the middle of July with some minor tweaks. All right. That's what's going to happen.
Oh yeah, I have no belief that it won't pass eventually. I mean, I do understand July 4th is a bit of a tall order, but also I think I think Trump is going to get what he wants ultimately. I think his ability to make people fall in line is strong enough that
Yep.
I think it'll pass pretty quick. And I don't think it's going to be whittled down all too much. I think it's going to certainly be whittled down, but nobody wants to go against him, so
Yeah.
I don't think anyone has the balls.
Now, really quick before we get off of this bill here and we head out, Elon Musk is having a fucking shitstorm. All right, tweeting about this bill, and he says that if it's the last thing he ever does, he's gonna primary every son of a gun who supported this bill. Right, that's what he said on Twitter. Um, I'm just curious on your thoughts about this. So just two-part question here is one, how do you think that the people of America will respond to this in the midterms? And then two, how do you think the donors, such as Elon Musk, will respond to this bill? He said he claims he's going to start his own third party. We'll see how that goes, but I just want to get your take on how you think this shakes out.
Well, okay. I think the chances that Elon creates a viable third party are about as likely as him bringing us to Mars in the next decade. So pretty low, basically zero. Uh, yeah, I don't. Ultimately, I would like to say that that this bill will not play well with the base, and maybe it won't. But I don't think Trump will catch any of the blame for it. Ultimately, I think somehow someone else will be blamed. Who knows who, but it won't be Trump. So for the Congress people voting for it, I think this will be ultimately a bad thing for them. But I don't think anything bad will come to Trump as a result of it. He's just Teflon Don, So, but in your case, what do you think? Do you think Elon is serious about all that, or is he just kind of having a fit and in a
He's having
few
a
days?
fit. He's having a fit. The and it come November next year, he will be funding. He will very quickly realize one of two things: either A, he can't start his own party, right, which is just a fact. I mean, a third party is a pipe dream, and then he will then conclude that any like reform has to be done in his case within the Republican Party, right? So similar to like the socialism movement here in America, they didn't start their own party, right? They are now, well, they're not anymore, right? They are now infiltrating, you could say, the Democratic Party and becoming a coalition within there, right? Similar to what the libertarians did within the Republican Party now. Like, think Thomas Massey. He's not a conservative. He's a libertarian, you know?
Oh yeah.
And Elon will do the same thing. He will have a form of I don't even know what you'd call it, techno fascism, like within the Republican Party. These libertarian, anarcho capitalists. But yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's what I think. And I agree with you. Trump will face no consequences for this. Yeah, it would have to be a hell of a deal for the Democrats to even just win a majority in the Senate. But the idea that they're going to have enough to impeach him, yeah, no. And that's the only real political consequence, right? I mean, he can take the shit all day, but the idea that they're going to have enough to votes to impeach him, I mean, let's get real, you know?